I'm leaving you for someone who truly gets me. Isabella sneered, clutching her phone. Alexander smiled calmly and replied, That's fine, because I just sent proof of your affair to his professional board. Her face froze in panic. The Austin sun was already blazing at 7 a.m., but Alexander was up, flipping pancakes in the kitchen of their modest duplex. The smell of maple syrup filled the air as he set the table for two, a Saturday ritual he hadn't missed in years. At 32, Alexander was the kind of guy who showed up, whether it was pulling extra shifts at the fire station or remembering his niece's soccer games. His wife, Isabella, a 30-year-old graphic designer, usually joined him with a sleepy smile, her sketchpad tucked under her arm. Today, though, she lingered in bed, her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Pancakes are ready, Alexander called, keeping his tone light. No answer. He shrugged it off, plating the food. Lately, Isabella had been distant. Late nights at her design studio, quick glances at her phone, short answers. He figured it was stress. Her latest project, a rebrand for a local brewery, had her working odd hours. Alexander trusted her. He always had. But last night's argument stuck with him. They'd been cleaning up after dinner when Isabella snapped. You're too comfortable, Alex. It's like we're stuck in a loop. Her words stung, not because they were loud, but because they were sharp, like she'd been holding them in for months. He'd stayed quiet, washing dishes, hoping time would smooth it over. It always had before. Now, as he sat alone at the table, the pancakes cooling, Isabella finally appeared, phone in hand. Morning, she mumbled, barely glancing up from her screen. She grabbed a coffee mug and scrolled through messages, her fingers moving fast. Alexander noticed the faint smile tugging at her lips, a smile he hadn't seen directed at him in weeks. Everything okay at work? He asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded, not looking up. Just deadlines. You know how it is. He didn't push. Instead, he took a bite of pancake, the sweetness turning bitter in his mouth. The rest of breakfast passed in near silence, broken only by the hum of the AC and the occasional ping of her phone. When she left for a quick client meeting, an hour later, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her car pulled out of the driveway, and he stared at the empty street, his gut twisting. By mid-afternoon, Isabella hadn't returned. Alexander busied himself at the station, running drills with the crew, but his mind kept drifting. He thought back to their early days, how Isabella would surprise him with goofy sketches of him as firefighter gear, how they'd stay up late dreaming about a house with a big backyard. Those moments felt distant now, like memories from someone else's life. That evening, Isabella came home late, her eyes avoiding his. We need to talk, she said, setting her bag down with a thud. Alexander braced himself, expecting another jab about his predictability. Instead, she sat across from him at the kitchen table, her voice steady but rehearsed. I think we should try couples therapy. I want us to reconnect, Alex. I feel like we're drifting. The suggestion hit him like a rogue wave. Therapy? He didn't think they were that broken. Sure, things weren't perfect, but he loved her. He showed it every day, through the small things like fixing her coffee just the way she liked it or making sure her car was gassed up. Still, if she thought therapy could help, he wouldn't say no. Okay, he said, nodding slowly. Let's do it. Isabella's face softened, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something Alexander couldn't place. I've already found someone, she said. Dr. Mark Reynolds. He's supposed to be great. First session's next week. Alexander agreed, though the name Mark lingered in his mind. He didn't know why it bothered him. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she was already sold on this guy. But he pushed the thought aside. This was about fixing things, about getting back to the way they used to be. He could handle a few awkward sessions if it meant keeping her. The first therapy session was in a small office downtown, a short drive from the fire station. Dr. Mark greeted them with a warm handshake, his voice smooth and confident. He was younger than Alexander expected, maybe late 30s, with an easy smile that put people at ease. The session started slow. Mark asked about their routines, their history, what brought them there. Alexander opened up about his long shifts, how he worried he wasn't home enough. Isabella spoke more, her words polished, like she'd rehearsed them. She talked about feeling unseen, about needing more spark. Alexander listened, nodding, trying to take it in without feeling attacked. Mark jotted notes, his eyes lingering on Isabella a little longer than Alexander liked. Or maybe he was imagining it. By the end of the hour, Mark suggested they keep coming weekly. "You're both invested," he said, "and that's a great start." Alexander left feeling cautiously hopeful. But as they drove home, Isabella was quiet, her phone glowing in her lap. Over the next few weeks, the sessions continued. Alexander tried to engage, sharing more than he was used to, how he felt pressure to be the steady one, how he missed their old spontaneity. Isabella nodded along, but her responses felt scripted, like she was saying what she thought Mark wanted to hear. Alexander noticed how she lit up when Mark spoke, how she called him Mark instead of Dr. Reynolds. It was subtle, but it gnawed at him. One night, after a session, Isabella mentioned she'd booked a private appointment with Mark. "Just for me," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I need to work on some personal stuff. It'll help us overall." Alexander nodded, but his chest tightened. Why did she need to see Mark alone? What wasn't she telling him? The next morning, as he poured coffee, he saw her phone on the counter, unlocked for once. A notification popped up, a text from Mark. Alexander's heart thudded. He didn't touch the phone, but the words burned into his mind. "Looking forward to tomorrow." He told himself it was nothing, just therapy talk. But as Isabella grabbed her phone and left for work, Alexander knew something was shifting. The trust he'd clung to was starting to crack, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could ignore it. Alexander leaned against the kitchen counter, the coffee in his mug gone cold. It was Tuesday morning, and Isabella had just left for another private session with Dr. Mark. Her goodbye was quick, her eyes glued to her phone as she grabbed her keys and slipped out the door. The duplex felt quieter than usual, the hum of the fridge amplifying the unease in Alexander's chest. He'd been trying to dismiss the nagging doubts, but they were piling up like ash after a fire. Last night, Isabella had come home late, claiming a client meeting ran over. She'd smiled, kissed his cheek, and gone straight to bed, her phone never leaving her hand. Alexander noticed the way she tilted the screen away from him, a habit she'd picked up in recent weeks. He hadn't said anything, but the memory of that text from Mark on her phone, "Looking forward to tomorrow," kept replaying in his mind. It could be innocent, he told himself. Therapy was personal, but the knot in his gut told a different story. At the fire station, Alexander threw himself into work, hauling equipment and running drills with the crew. The physical strain usually cleared his head, but today his thoughts kept drifting. He remembered how Isabella used to text him during his shifts, little notes about her day, or a funny sketch she'd drawn. Now, her messages were rare, and when they came, they were brief. "Home late. Don't wait up." He'd chalked it up to her workload, but the timing of her private sessions with Mark, always late afternoons, always on fixed days, felt too deliberate. That evening, Alexander sat at his laptop, scrolling through articles about couples therapy. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, reassurance, maybe that this was normal. Instead, he stumbled across forums discussing therapist ethics. One post caught his eye, a story about a counselor crossing boundaries with a client. The details were vague, but the phrase "abusing trust" stuck with him. He closed the laptop, his pulse quickening. Was he being paranoid, or was there something to this? The next day, Isabella left her phone on the kitchen table while she showered, a rare slip. Alexander stared at it, his fingers itching. He'd never snooped before. It felt like a betrayal of who he was. But the weight of doubt was heavier than his principles. He picked up the phone, the screen still unlocked. A quick glance showed a new message from Mark. "Same place, 5 p. Wear that necklace I like." Alexander's breath caught. He scrolled up, his eyes scanning fragments of their chat. "Missed you last night. Can't stop thinking about you." Isabella's replies were just as intimate, laced with a warmth she hadn't shown him in months. He set the phone down, his hands shaking. The words burned into his mind, but he needed more than glimpses of texts. He needed proof, something undeniable. At the station, during a break, he researched monitoring apps on his own phone, keeping the screen angled away from his crew. He found one that promised discretion. It could mirror messages, calls, and even locations to an email account. It felt like crossing a line, but so did being lied to. That night, Isabella was home early for once, but her energy was off, distracted, almost performative. She talked about a new project, her words quick and rehearsed, avoiding his gaze. Alexander played along, asking about her day, but his mind was elsewhere. After she went to bed, he installed the app on her phone while it charged in the living room. It took less than 3 minutes. He locked the device, wiped his fingerprints, and sat in the dark, waiting for the first report. By morning, his email inbox had a new message, a screenshot of Isabella's chat with Mark. "Counting the hours till I see you," she'd written. Mark's reply, "Office is ours tonight. He'll never know." Alexander's stomach churned. An audio file followed, Isabella's voice low and intimate. "You make me feel alive, Mark. I haven't felt this way in years." Alexander recognized that tone. It was how she used to talk to him back when their nights were filled with laughter and plans. He played another file, this one Mark's voice. "Don't worry about Alex. He's too busy playing the good husband to notice." The words cut deeper than Alexander expected. He wasn't just being betrayed by his wife, but mocked by the man they trusted to fix their marriage. He saved the files, his jaw tight. This wasn't just a fling. It was calculated, hidden behind the facade of therapy. He thought of confronting Isabella then and there, but he stopped himself. Anger wouldn't get him answers. He needed to be smart, to gather everything before making a move. The next few days, Alexander kept up appearances. He made breakfast, asked about her day, and went to their joint therapy sessions, sitting across from Mark without flinching. Mark's calm demeanor, his practiced nods, his "let's explore" that phrases, now felt like a performance. Isabella leaned into it, praising Mark's insight in front of Alexander, her words dripping with admiration. Alexander nodded along, but inside, he was cataloging every detail. Her quick glances at Mark, the way she lingered after sessions, the excuses for her solo appointments. On Thursday, the app sent more evidence. A photo Isabella had sent Mark, taken in a hotel parking lot, captioned, "Our spot." The timestamp matched her last private session. Alexander cross-checked the location. It was nowhere near Mark's office. His hands clenched the phone. He wasn't just losing his marriage. He was losing it to a lie, orchestrated in a space meant for healing. He started planning. Confronting them now would be messy, emotional. He needed leverage, something that would hold up beyond a shouting match. He contacted a lawyer friend, keeping it vague, asking about legal recourse for professional misconduct. The friend mentioned the state psychology board, explaining how therapists could lose their license for ethical breaches. Alexander took notes, his resolve hardening. He'd keep going to therapy, keep collecting evidence, and when the time was right, he'd expose them both. As Isabella left for her next session, Alexander watched her car disappear down the street. He opened his email, another batch of messages waiting. One stood out, a text from Mark. "He's clueless. Let's make tonight count." Alexander closed his laptop, his heart steady now. Doubt was gone. In its place was a quiet, burning determination to reclaim the truth. Alexander's truck idled in the parking lot across from Dr. Mark's office, the engine's low hum matching the pulse in his temples. It was Thursday, 4:45 p.m., and Isabella had just pulled into the lot for her private session. Alexander gripped his phone, the screen glowing with a new batch of intercepted messages. The latest one from Mark read, "Doors unlocked. Just you and me tonight." Isabella's reply, already smiling. Alexander's jaw tightened. He'd been collecting evidence for days, texts, voicemails, even GPS pings showing Isabella at a hotel instead of the office. Today, he'd end the charade. He'd spent the morning preparing. At the fire station, he'd slipped away during a break to call his lawyer friend, Sarah, who confirmed the psychology board took ethical breaches seriously, especially with hard proof. Alexander had forwarded her the files, screenshots of flirty chats, audio of Mark mocking him, and Isabella's voice confessing her feelings. Sarah promised to draft a complaint for the board. "This is airtight," she'd said. "He's done." Alexander also backed up everything to a secure drive, emailing copies to his sister for safekeeping. He wasn't taking chances. Now, sitting in his truck, he played one last audio to steel himself. It was Mark. "Alex thinks he's saving the marriage. Let him. Keeps him out of our way." The words fueled Alexander's resolve. He grabbed his phone, slipped into his pocket, and stepped out into the Austin heat. The office building loomed ahead, its glass doors reflecting the late afternoon sun. He crossed the street, his steps deliberate, like he was walking into a fire he'd trained to face. Inside, the receptionist glanced up, but Alexander didn't stop. "Here for Dr. Reynolds," he said, brushing past her desk. She started to protest, but he was already down the hall, his boots heavy on the tile. Mark's office was at the end, the door slightly ajar. Alexander paused, hearing soft laughter. Isabella's. His stomach twisted, but he pushed the feeling down. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about truth. He nudged the door open and stepped inside, locking it behind him. Isabella sat in an armchair, a notebook on her lap, her posture relaxed. Mark stood near his desk, mid-sentence, his confident smile faltering as he saw Alexander. Isabella turned, her eyes widening. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Her voice wavered, caught off guard. Alexander didn't answer. He pulled out his phone, opened the app, and tapped an audio file. Isabella's voice filled the room. "You make me feel alive, Mark. I haven't felt this way in years." Her face drained of color. Mark opened his mouth, but Alexander cut him off with another tap. Mark's voice now. He's clueless. "Let's make tonight count." The words hung in the air, undeniable. Isabella stood, clutching her notebook like a shield. "Alex, it's not what you think," she started, but Alexander raised a hand, his expression calm but unyielding. "Don't," he said. "I've got everything. Texts, audios, locations. You've been meeting at hotels, not here. I know it all." He turned to Mark, whose hands were now fidgeting at his sides. "And you, using your office, your title, to manipulate my wife. You mocked me while I sat here, spilling my guts to save my marriage." Mark tried to recover, his voice smooth but strained. "Alexander, let's talk this through. You're misinterpreting." "No," Alexander snapped. "I'm not. The state psychology board has the files. So does my lawyer." "You're dumb, Mark." He pulled up a screenshot on his phone, holding it out. A text from Mark about their spot at a hotel. "This is dated yesterday. Want to play the voicemail too?" Isabella's hands shook as she sank back into the chair. "Alex, I didn't mean for this to happen. I was confused. Confused." Alexander's voice stayed steady, but his eyes burned. "You brought me here, said you wanted to fix us. But you used these sessions to lie, to cheat with him." He pointed at Mark, who looked away, his composure crumbling. "You let me bare my soul while you two laughed behind my back." He stepped closer, locking eyes with Isabella. "I trusted you, both of you, and you turned this into a game." He tapped his phone again, letting another audio play. Mark's voice smug. He's too busy playing the good husband to notice. Isabella covered her mouth, tears welling up, but Alexander felt no pity. "Not now. I've sent everything to the board," he said, his tone cold. "And my lawyer's ready to move. This isn't just about us, Isabella. He broke every rule of his profession. He'll answer for it." He turned to Mark. "You'll lose your license. Maybe more." Mark finally spoke, his voice low. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We can settle this quietly." Alexander almost laughed. "Quietly? You don't get to call the shots anymore." He unlocked the door, pausing before leaving. "Isabella, I'm filing for divorce. You'll hear from my lawyer." He looked at Mark one last time. "And you? Good luck explaining this to the board." He walked out, ignoring Isabella's choked sob and Mark's attempt to call after him. The hallway blurred as he moved, his heartbeat loud but steady. Outside, the air hit him like a release. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove to his sister's place, where he'd already arranged to stay. His phone buzzed, Isabella calling, but he let it ring. There was nothing left to say. That night, alone in the guest room, Alexander opened his laptop. More files had come through from a monitoring app. Another text from Isabella to Mark, sent just after he left. "He knows. What do we do?" Mark's reply, "Stay calm. We'll figure it out." Alexander saved it, adding it to the growing dossier. He wasn't just gathering evidence now. He was building a case, one that would end Mark's career and free him from a marriage built on lies. As he lay back, staring at the ceiling, Alexander felt the weight of betrayal, but also a strange clarity. He'd walked into that office ready to fight for his marriage. Now, he was fighting for himself. The confrontation wasn't the end. It was the spark. Whatever came next, he'd face it with the same resolve that had carried him through every fire. Alexander woke to the buzz of his phone on his sister's guest room nightstand. It was 6 a.m., and the screen showed 3 missed calls from Isabella, plus a string of texts begging to talk. He ignored them, his focus now on the next steps. Yesterday's confrontation in Mark's office had been surgical, calm, deliberate, final. But the aftermath was just beginning, and Alexander was ready to see it through. He opened his laptop, checking the secure drive where he'd stored the evidence. Screenshots, voicemails, GPS logs, all time-stamped and organized. The truth was his weapon, and he wasn't letting it slip. At the fire station, Alexander kept his routine tight, focusing on equipment checks and training drills. His crew noticed his quiet intensity, but didn't pry. During a break, he called Sarah, his lawyer friend, who confirmed the psychology board had received his complaint against Mark. "They're fast-tracking it," she said. "The audio and texts are damning. He's looking at suspension, maybe worse." She also had divorce papers drafted, ready for Alexander to review. He thanked her, feeling a weight lift, not from relief but from clarity. He was taking control. Back at his sister's, Alexander sifted through new monitoring app alerts. Isabella had texted Mark after the confrontation. "He's got everything. I'm scared." Mark's reply was curt, "Don't panic. I'll handle it." Alexander smirked bitterly. Mark's confidence was crumbling, and he knew it. Another email brought a formal acknowledgement from the psychology board, requesting a meeting to discuss his complaint. Alexander forwarded it to Sarah, who advised him to bring all evidence and stay factual. "No emotion," she said. "Just the truth." Isabella called again that evening. Alexander let it go to voicemail. Her message was shaky. "Alex, please, I messed up. Can we just talk?" He didn't respond. Instead, he drove to a coffee shop to meet his sister, Mia, who'd been his anchor since he left the duplex. Over black coffee, he told her everything: the texts, the hotel meetups, Mark's betrayal. Mia esse jotaitend. She used therapy to cheat, and he enabled it. "You're doing the right thing, Alex." Her support grounded him, reminding him he wasn't alone. The next day, Alexander met Sarah at her office to sign the divorce papers. She walked him through the process. Texas law favored no-fault divorces, but the evidence could strengthen his case for asset division. "You've got enough to show infidelity," she said. "It'll help if she contests anything." Alexander nodded, signing without hesitation. The marriage was over long before he walked into Mark's office. The papers just made it official. Meanwhile, whispers spread in Austin's tight-knit community. Mutual friends texted Alexander, some offering support, others fishing for gossip. One message from a friend of Isabella's stood out. "She's a wreck, says it was a mistake." Alexander didn't reply. He'd heard enough excuses. At the fire station, a coworker clapped his shoulder, saying, "Heard you're dealing with some stuff. Here if you need me." Alexander appreciated the gesture, but kept details private. He didn't need pity, just space to rebuild. A week later, the psychology board called Alexander for a preliminary interview. He arrived with a USB drive of evidence and a printed timeline of Mark's misconduct. The board's investigator, a sharp woman named Ms. Carter, listened as he recounted the therapy sessions, Isabella's private meetings, and the intercepted messages. She reviewed the files, her expression unreadable. "This is serious," she said. "Dr. Reynolds will be notified of a formal hearing. We'll need your testimony." Alexander agreed, leaving the meeting with a sense of momentum. Mark's career was unraveling, and he'd done it to himself. Isabella's absence from the duplex gave Alexander room to breathe. He stopped by to grab his things, finding the place untouched since he left. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the counter, a reminder of their last breakfast together. He packed clothes, his work gear, and a few photos from before things soured. As he loaded his truck, a neighbor waved, asking if everything was okay. "Just moving forward," Alexander said, and drove off. The monitoring app pinged again that night. Isabella had messaged Mark, "They're investigating you. I am sorry." Mark's response was frantic. "You said he'd never find out. Fix this." Alexander saved the exchange, forwarding it to Sarah. It was another nail in Mark's coffin. Social media buzzed with vague posts from Isabella's friends, hinting at drama without naming names. Alexander stayed offline, avoiding the noise. He didn't need validation from strangers, just results. At the station, Alexander threw himself into a new training program, mentoring rookies. The work kept him focused, a reminder of who he was outside the betrayal. He started seeing a new therapist, Dr. Ellis, recommended by Sarah. Unlike Mark, Dr. Ellis was straightforward, focusing on Alexander's goals, processing the hurt, rebuilding trust in himself. In their first session, Alexander admitted, "I ignored the signs too long. I want to believe her." Dr. Ellis nodded. "You're here now. That's what counts." Isabella tried reaching out again, leaving a voicemail. "I'm moving out, Alex. I know I hurt you. I just want to make this right." Alexander deleted it. Her words felt hollow, too late to matter. He learned from Mia that Isabella was staying with a friend. Her design work slowing as clients sensed her distraction. Part of him wondered if she'd face her own reckoning, but he pushed the thought aside. His focus was on justice, not revenge. By the end of the week, the psychology board sent a notice. Mark's license was temporarily suspended pending the hearing. Alexander read it twice, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The fallout wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional, public, permanent. He sat back, his sister's dog curled up nearby, and exhaled. The pieces were falling into place. Isabella and Mark had built their lives in secret. Now, they'd face the consequences in the open. Alexander parked his truck outside a small Austin cafe, the morning sun glinting off the windshield. It had been 3 months since he'd confronted Isabella and Mark in that office, and today was the final step in closing that chapter. Isabella had texted last week, asking to meet, promising no excuses, just a chance to talk. Against his better judgment, he'd agreed, choosing this neutral spot far from their old haunts. He wasn't here for reconciliation. He needed to see the end for himself. Inside, Isabella sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She looked up as he approached, her posture tense. Alexander sat across from her, his expression calm but distant. "Thanks for coming," she started, her voice low. "I owe you an apology, Alex. I got lost, confused support for something else. I know I hurt you." Her words were earnest, but they carried no weight for him anymore. He listened, letting her finish, then leaned forward. "I don't hate you," he said evenly, "but there's no trust left. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I wish you well, but we're done." He placed a few dollars on the table for his untouched coffee and walked out, her quiet sobs fading behind him. The air outside felt lighter, like he'd finally shed the last tether to their past. Back at his sister's place, Alexander checked his email. The psychology board had sent an update. Mark's license was permanently revoked after a unanimous ruling. The evidence, texts, audios, and GPS logs, proved he'd exploited his role, violating ethical codes by engaging in a relationship with Isabella while counseling them both. The board's report cited gross misconduct and barred him from reapplying. Alexander exhaled, the finality sinking in. Mark's career was over, his reputation in ruins. Sarah, his lawyer, called later that day. "The divorce is finalized," she said. "You got the house and most of the savings." She didn't contest it. Alexander nodded, unsurprised. Isabella had moved to Dallas, taking a lower-paying design job after her social circle in Austin shrank. Mutual friends had drifted away, some siding with Alexander, others staying silent. He didn't care about their opinions. He'd stopped seeking approval when he started seeking truth. Alexander moved into a new apartment near the fire station, a simple one-bedroom he'd set up with his brother's help. The space was his own, free of memories tied to Isabella. He threw himself into work, earning a promotion to lead trainer for new recruits. The role gave him purpose, a chance to guide others through the discipline he'd leaned on during the chaos. His crew respected his focus, never pushing for details about his personal life, though they'd heard whispers of the scandal. Therapy with Dr. Ellis became a steady anchor. In their sessions, Alexander unpacked the betrayal, not just from Isabella, but from the system he'd trusted, therapy itself. "I ignored the red flags," he admitted once. "Thought love meant sticking it out." Dr. Ellis shook his head. "Love means respect, too. You're learning to give that to yourself." The words stuck, reshaping how Alexander saw his worth. He joined a support group for men navigating betrayal, a suggestion from Dr. Ellis. The first meeting felt raw, strangers sharing stories of broken trust, anger, shame. Alexander listened more than he spoke, but their honesty grounded him. One guy, a mechanic named Javier, said, "We're not weak for hurting. We're strong for moving on." Alexander carried that with him, finding strength in the shared silence of men rebuilding. Socially, Alexander distanced himself from old circles tied to Isabella. He reconnected with childhood friends, grabbing beers after shifts or joining them for hiking trips in the hill country. These were people who knew him before the marriage, before the lies. Their laughter, untainted by the past, reminded him of who he could be again. He started running, too, the rhythm of his steps on Austin's trails clearing his mind. Mark's downfall spread quietly through professional networks. Psychology blogs picked up the story, anonymized, but scathing, using it as a case study on ethical boundaries. Alexander avoided the online chatter, but Mia forwarded him a post where colleagues condemned Mark's actions, calling for stricter oversight in therapy practices. Mark had tried to pivot, offering online life coaching sessions, but his name was toxic now, his client base gone. Isabella reached out once more, a brief email apologizing again and saying she was finding herself in Dallas. Alexander didn't reply. Her choices had consequences, and he wasn't her redemption story. He focused on his own path, signing up for a leadership course at the station and planning a solo trip to Colorado, something he'd always wanted to do but put off for Isabella's sake. One evening, as he sat on his apartment's balcony, the city's skyline glowing in the distance, Alexander felt a quiet shift. The pain of betrayal hadn't vanished, but it was no longer a weight. It was a lesson. He'd trusted blindly once, believing love could fix anything. Now, he knew better. Trust was earned, and self-respect was non-negotiable. He'd chosen himself, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The fire station buzzer sounded in his memory, a call to action. That's what this was now, a new call. Not to save a marriage or punish the guilty, but to build a life where he answered only to his own truth. Alexander sipped his beer, the night air cool against his skin, and let the past settle behind him. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through the steady, undeniable power of the truth.